So today we want to look at ethical hacking, and ethical hacking is one of the cybersecurity aspects that is demanding, and so many things have changed in the cybersecurity space, most especially in ethical hacking field. So in 2026, we'll be looking at ethical hacking. The question is, what actually is ethical hacking? I know majority of you have many things to say, or based on your research before, you might have many things to talk about ethical hacking, but please follow suit as we discuss about ethical hacking in this course. And so in this course, we'll be looking at everything that has to do with ethical hacking, different phases of ethical hacking. We'll be looking at the tools to use in ethical hacking, and how to conduct different phases, how to conduct ethical hacking from the first phase to the last phase. So what is ethical hacking? And so we'll be looking at what is ethical hacking, type of ethical hacking. We'll be looking at some legal and some ethical considerations, and also the overviews of ethical hacking processes. This is what we'll be looking at. And so what is ethical hacking? What actually is ethical hacking, and how do ethical hacking work? Ethical hacking is actually a process of stimulating cyber attack against computer systems, network infrastructures, or applications to identify vulnerability that could be exploited by malicious attackers or hackers. That is to say that ethical hacking has to do with looking for vulnerability within a system, a network, an infrastructure, or an organization before malicious attacker does or do. So there are some roles that an ethical hacker fit in. What are the roles of an ethical hacker? One of the roles of an ethical hacker is to identify security weaknesses. To identify weaknesses within the security, exploit those security ethically, and provide a detailed reports, and also not just report, also provide recommendations on how to tackle such security weaknesses. That is actually the roles of an ethical hacker. And for you to be an ethical hacker, there are some skills that you need to be an ethical hacker. One of the skills you need to be an ethical hacker is networking, system administration, cybersecurity principles, and hands-on experiences on different ethical hacking tools and techniques. And then this actually leads us to different type of ethical hacker or ethical hacking. As a person who is interested in ethical hacking, you should know that there are different type of ethical hacking. One of the different type of ethical hacking is called black box. Black box is a type of ethical hacking whereby the ethical hacker does not have a prior knowledge about the network, the infrastructure he or she is being asked to carry out a penetration testing on, or an ethical hacking on. White box is when the attacker has a full control, a full knowledge of a special, like example, an internal security auditor, or or the ethical hacker working as an internal person, or the full information was given to an ethical hacker just to carry out a security check. That is what we refer to as what? As black box. So we also have a gray box. A gray box is when an ethical hacker have a minimal knowledge of the network, the infrastructure that he or she want to carry out a testing on. So he has some basic knowledge about such organization, such infrastructure, and such a network, or whatever it may that the person is carrying out a testing on. And so there are some legal considerations that we should look at in ethical hacking. If you want to actually succeed in ethical hacking, and if you want to succeed in the field of ethical hacking, there are some legal considerations that we look at. One of the considerations is referred to as permissions and scope. One of the things that differentiate an ethical hacker from a malicious hacker is permissions. Is permission. An ethical hacker have permissions, authorizations to whatever testing that he or she is being carried out. So he must obtain either a written permission or oral permission or a verbal permission before you carry out your testing. And then the scope simply means what you have been asked to do, so you don't go exceeding what you have been asked to do. That is what referred to as the scope of an ethical hacking. So you stay on the lane, don't exceeding what you have been asked to do. Then contextual agreement. You must have an agreement. Okay, this is what I will do for me to do this, carry out this test. This is what I'll do, and this is your own responsibility as my client, or this is your own responsibility as an individual organization. This agreement must be put in place so that in case anything happens, you will not bear the consequence of whatever actions that happen. And also, there are some laws and regulations that govern the cyberspace. You must fully be aware of those laws so that you not go against those laws. So as an ethical hacker, you must be aware of the laws that govern the cyberspace in your countries, in the state where you are, in the organizations where we are carrying out such testing, and also in each industry actually have industry-specific regulations. You must be aware of those laws and regulations. And then reporting obligation. As an ethical hacker, you must know who you are reporting to, so that you not give out an information to the wrong hand or to the wrong person or to the wrong entity. So you must follow the ethical code of ethics. The hacker codes of ethics is that you must keep everything professional, and secondly, whatever that is not meant to be disclosed must be kept private. So privacy is of utmost importance in ethical hacking. So you must respect the organization privacy. You must respect each privacy. So we'll also be looking at different phases of ethical hacking. Ethical hacking follow different phases, but here I categorize this in 4 different phases. I categorize it as a pre-attack phase. This is what you do before you carry out the testing or the attack. Then we also have the attack phase, the post-attack phase, and the reporting phase. These are the different phases that I've categorized it as. So these are the different phases I've categorized this: the pre-attack, the post-attack, and then the attack phase and the reporting. So let's look at what is there in the pre-attack phase, what we'll be looking at in the pre-attack phase. Now, in the pre-attack phase, we'll be looking at reconnaissance and information gathering. Reconnaissance and information gathering. We'll also be looking at scanning and enumeration. So what is reconnaissance? Reconnaissance simply means gathering information about your target. Yes, in the process of gathering the information can be a passive or an active, which we'll be looking at in a reconnaissance phase. We'll be looking at it in the reconnaissance phase. So gathering information about a target could be a passive or an active reconnaissance. The scanning and enumeration is when we carry out a vulnerability analysis or a vulnerability testing against the target, against the network, against the organization. It's what we call scanning and enumeration. This is what we do in the pre-attack phase, at the time where we have not. So you will help us to gather much information to have a deeper knowledge about our target before we carry out the attack. So the next phase is the attack phase, which what you see basically in the attack phase is the exploitation phase, or what we refer to as gaining access. This phase, the attacker, or as an ethical hacker, you carry out exploitation. This is where you try to see if you can penetrate through the systems or the organization using different techniques and strategies and tools to carry out such attack. So it's called exploitation. It's called exploitation or gaining access. So the post-exploitation phase has to do with maintaining access and covering of track. Yeah, you must understand this as an ethical hacker to be able to do this. So gaining access or maintaining access is important. You must learn how to maintain access as an ethical hacker. You must learn how to maintain access as an ethical hacker, and you must protect your privacy. You must protect yourself. That is where anonymity and privacy comes into play. So the next phase in exploitation is post exploitation is covering of track. You must cover your track. You must actually find a way to cover your track, and this is where also privacy also comes into play. How to cover your track so that you will not be exposed to also malicious attackers or to unauthorized entity. So to be able to protect yourself and preserve your dignity as well as an ethical hacker. So the next phase we'll be looking at is called reporting. In reporting, there are two things we do in reporting: documentation and recommendation. You don't just end your testing in just only documentation. You must also recommend, or especially if you find vulnerability, or if you don't even find vulnerability, you must actually recommend. Assuming you find vulnerability, you must recommend how those vulnerability come about and how to strengthen the target or the network, the infrastructure, so that future of further occurrences of attack will not take place. That is what you do under reporting, documentations, and recommendation. Now let's look at other aspects that we need to look at and how to set up an environment. There are some tools and that you need to set up an ethical hacking labs. Here, there are some tools that you need as a beginner or even a professional. There are some tools that you need. One of those tools is Kali Linux. Yes, one of those tools is Kali Linux. In subsequent time, we'll be seeing how to set up these tools in the practical means on how to set up these tools. So you need Kali Linux. You need virtual machines like VirtualBox or VMware to actually set up this the environment. This is what you need to carry out your vulnerability analysis, your ethical hacking. Kali Linux is a Debian-based Linux distribution designed for penetration testing and basically forensic investigation. So it is actually come with a, why majority use Kali Linux is come with a pre-installed security tools. Yeah, if there are other tools, there are other operating systems that you can use. You can also use Parrot OS. If you are not conversant with Kali Linux, you can use Parrot operating system to also carry out ethical hacking. So let's talk about, you also need a visualization tools like VMware stations or a VMBoss. These are some of the tools you need to carry out your penetration testing. So in our subsequent classes, we'll be looking at the practical base on how to set up this lab, how to set up the virtual lab on our system, both on Windows, on Mac, or any other Linux distributions or that we want to use. So please stay tuned as we continue on this series on this course on ethical hacking. Thank you and see you in the next